Hey, what's up? This is Mark at Alchemist.camp, where we learn Elixir and Phoenix by building things. Today is episode number 3 of the Phoenix 1.4 chat server project. And first thing I'm going to do is just walk you through a couple changes I made since the end of last video. By the way, if you haven't seen the last 2 videos, definitely check those out first. One is I upgraded Elixir to version 1.7. Depending on what you've got running, you may or may not want to do that. The other changes you almost definitely want to do though. Phoenix version 1.4 has been released, so delete these -RC flags. It's not a release candidate anymore. It's actually out there. And then Phoenix Ecto bumped up to version 4.0, and that was just to keep everything compatible. There were some things that required a higher version than 3.6. So with those changes, let me commit those. With those changes, we're ready to move on to making sessions. So first place we'll start with that is in the router right here. So we will add some resources. Actually, we'll just copy that line down. Resources for sessions, and it's going to be a session controller that hasn't been created yet. And this is going to be limited to certain actions. So only new, so creating a new session is how they'll log in, then create and delete, we'll log them out. And then finally we're going to add another flag here, singleton true. Normally resources here will expand to all of the typical actions, and it will also automatically put in a /ID like this. So if you went to users/3, it would get the user ID number 3. We don't want that with sessions though, because sessions aren't numbered. So we just add that singleton true, and it doesn't happen. Then finally, let's add a couple more routes for the sessions here, just for UX reasons. I don't like going to session/new. Instead, I want one called login that corresponds to session controller and new. And then similarly, I want one called logout that is delete and log out. There we go. Save that. Neither of these are going to work though, because we don't have any session controller, let alone the templates for it. So let's make that controller. Go up here and call it session controller.ex. This module will be called exactly what we expect it to be, which is chitchat web, which is the name of our app, .session controller. Then since it is a Phoenix controller, we're going to use chitchat web controller. That macro will bring in all the functionality of a Phoenix controller. And finally, we're going to alias chitchat.accounts, because the sessions controller is all about logging in and out. We're going to need those accounts. We'll just do 2 actions for now. We'll do new. And new will take a con, and a second argument we'll throw away. And it's just going to render con and new.html. Save that. Now, of course, it can't render this because we don't have the template yet. Let's go through that in a moment. Then we'll also make a delete. And delete is a bit different from new. Delete isn't going to be rendering anything. It's just going to log them out. The way it'll do that is by deleting the session. So configure session drop true. This is built into Phoenix. This will basically just delete their cookie, get rid of their session, they'll be done. Then we'll put flash, which will be seen if they clicked on a link to do it. We won't see it if we go directly to the route though. Successfully signed out. And finally, let's redirect them to the root path. Redirect, if I can spell it properly, to /. Looks like VS Code is not formatting on save. Let me check my preferences. Format on save is turned on. Maybe I need a plugin that I haven't gotten for Windows yet. I mean, I had on Windows, but don't have here. Elixir Formatter. That should do it. VS Code. Prettier. Does Prettier work for Elixir? Well, I want both, so grab that, and I'll grab this one, and I'll reload. All right, let's save this again. There we go. Much better. Okay, so now I can type lazily and we'll get standard formatting on save. Let's fire up the application and have a look. IES-S mix phoenix.server. Unfull screen that, get over here, load the page. And that is kind of boring. Let's go to log out. We do have the route. It went to log out, and then we get the redirect to the root path. Excellent. And log in. There's no session view. I was expecting a template. Got to add the session view as well. Let's hide the terminal, full screen this, and actually I'm going to bump up the font size a little bit as well. So in our views, we have a bunch of views here, and they're almost all the same. They're really simple. Let's just copy that whole view and go back over to the side tab with Command 0. Then I'm going to add a new file, session view.ex, and copy paste this in with one change, which is session. Save that. Now our error should be a little better. We just don't have the template. Excellent. In templates, we're going to need a whole directory for session. So add that first, session. And inside this session directory, we'll add a file called new.html.ex. We'll wrap the whole thing in a div. So do it like that. And we'll put an H1 in. You know, I'm going to get out of full screen just so we can see the changes as we go. H1, and let's use Emmet to do it. Sign in. Excellent. You know what? Just for now, we're going to throw in a style to make that a little bit narrower. Max width 300 px. There we go. Looks reasonable. All right. Then I'm going to add a form 4 just like we did in the last video. So form 4 will take a con and it'll take session path and a con. The action for the form is going to be create. So this form or this page is going to be shown when someone hits the new action, but when they fill out the form and submit it, that has to hit the create action. Method is post as user and have an anonymous function, and F will be how we'll refer to our form throughout the rest of this. And this is the end of our form, so we don't forget. We'll add a div, and inside of here, a text input F for the form, that same anonymous function I mentioned up here. So we pass form to the text input as well as the label, and we're going to put some placeholder text in here, and that's just going to be email capitalized, and we'll add a class form control to it. Save that. And session path, that helper function, let me get rid of the side actually. There we go. Session path helper function should be generating a path. Oh right, that's a Phoenix 1.4 thing. We actually have to say routes.sessionPath. And then we have access to it, I believe. Yep, okay, so we have a sign in, got some placeholder text. Excellent. Let's copy this exact same format down, and we'll make one for the password. Password's a little bit different though. Instead of a text input, it's a password input. And it's going to be password, and a placeholder is just going to be password, and the rest is the same. That is password. Okay, we got to be able to submit the form, and that's going to be pretty straightforward as well. So we'll just use the submit helper. Submit, log in. Put space there. All right. So Alchemist and ASDF, the password I created last time, and that fails because there is no create function. So let's add that. We'll go to our controller and we'll add that function. So create is going to take a con, and this time we do care about the second argument. So this form is going to come in as a user. Remember that post as user, that's what this is doing. And the user has an email which was sent in the form, and we'll capture that as email, and also has a password. We'll do the same with password, and then we're going to use a helper from our accounts context called authenticate by email and password that we haven't written yet. And there are three possible results. Either we'll get back a valid user, or it will be unauthorized, like the username and the password don't match, or it'll just be not found. We can't find the account. So let's start with a case statement. Accounts.authenticate by, you know what, this is easy enough to misspell. Let's write the function in our accounts context first. So accounts, there we go. So last time we made a create user function here, and we're using this credential registration change set to make a new user with a password. We've got the same change set for updating a user's password, and we have another one, just credential change set, for changes to a credential that don't involve changing the password. So we're going to use these helpers, and actually let's just take a quick look at them. Credential. So this is our normal change set, just getting the email and making sure it's a decent format. Then the registration change set does everything this change set does, and then it also makes sure that there's a password, that the confirmation matches it, it's at least 8 characters long, and it hashes the password and puts the hashed password into the change set. And these fields are virtual password confirmation, so that never gets saved because they never should. Now back to our accounts. Let's make a new function at the beginning of the credential block, and we'll call this authenticate by email and password. By email and password. And it's going to take an email, and it's going to take a password. And this will get a credential from the email and the password. And it will preload the user into the credential. So normally we've got a user and we preload the credential into the user. This time we're doing it the other way around because the credential is what we're given. So repo.preload user. And then we'll do credential. So there has to be a credential, and check password which we got from Argon 2, check password given pass and credential dot password hash. And if this matches, then we'll return OK and credential dot user. So notice we're not returning the credential with the user preloaded into it. We're just returning the user. Now let's say we have a credential, which means that we had that email in the database and we're able to preload a user, but this check password was not truthy, which would mean they put in a password that didn't match the email. Well, in that case, we're just going to return an unauthorized error. So error unauthorized. And finally, if neither of those cases are true, that means the credential is falsy, which means nobody is signed up with that email. It just doesn't exist in our database. So we'll return an error not found. However, we don't want this to return really quickly, whereas these two cases would take a while because we're checking the password. So instead, what we'll do is we'll run dummy check password, which is also in Argon 2. And that will just take an equivalent amount of time as actually checking the password. We should be able to try this out from the command line. Let's restart the server and try that again. We do have the function now, foo at example.com, and the password, we'll just type in LKJ once and error unauthorized. Very good. Now let's try a correct one, and it returns a user. Finally, let's try fool at example.com. That doesn't exist, error not found. Now that that's working, we can go back to our session controller and finish our create function. So accounts.authenticate by email password with the email and the password. Do if we get OK and a user, that's excellent. And we want to log them in. Con put flash info welcome back, and then we're going to put the user in the session so that it's available to the rest of our app. User ID and user.id is the ID from this user that we pulled in. Configure session to renew. Renew true. So it's kind of the opposite of what we did below with the drop true. And finally, redirect to slash. In the case that we get an unauthorized error, then we'll put a flash saying so. So just grab that one down and whoa. There we go. Put flash error and bad email / password combination. And we'll also redirect in this case as well, but we're going to redirect to the new session path. So instead of that, will be routes.sessionPath con and new. And let's get these lined up properly. Then finally, we're going to handle the error not found. Same basic thing, just have a different message. Account not found. All right, the final step for sessions is I want to add some visual feedback to the page. I always like to do this just so that we can see what's going on and we don't accidentally assume something is working when it's not. Whoa, speaking of which, this misspelling isn't going to work. Let's change that to routes. And then for visual feedback in general, we'll go to the page controller. And this is what renders the main index page. And we're going to get that user ID out of the session. So user ID equals get session. And this function is available on any Phoenix controller. We have to pass it the con and then the key we want to get. In this case, it's user ID. And then we're actually also going to pass that along to the template as an assigns, so user ID. Now that this is done, we can open up the layout template. Actually, first let's get rid of this huge banner that's in there, and then we'll use that assigns we just created, like this, user ID, and while we're at it, we'll put a little bit of text there as well. You see that user ID, and there's no ID because nobody's signed in. And unfortunately, this is going to break the login page. That's because we don't have this assigns available from every single page, but the template is being used on every single page. So in order to fix that, we will get the con.assigns, and that includes all of the assigns. And if we were to do this, we'd have the exact same problem we currently have. And we would be fine on the main page because we do have the assigns on the main page. But there's an alternate syntax. We can do this. And now, if the key doesn't exist, that's fine. So we can see there's no user ID. And we'll try Alchemist. Log in. Now we can see user ID 1, and we can log out, and now there's no user ID. And we can log in with the other user. Okay, that's it for this episode on sessions. Next episode, we'll build an auth module so that different pages can act differently depending on whether or not anyone is signed in. And after that, we'll be on to the channels. Till next time, code on.